Welcome back to Killer Fun, where we explore the intersection of crime and entertainment every other week. I'm Christy.
And I'm Jackie.
And we're so glad that you're back with us today. Today, we are talking about The Crowded Room on Apple TV Plus, Episode 1, Exodus.
Uh-huh. Like from this TV show, because it sucks.
You didn't like the first episode?
I hated it.
Oh.
I want to rip this to shreds today.
Oh, well, by all means. I liked the first episode well enough.
Did you?
Uh-huh. And then I made all my notes, and then I watched like a couple more episodes, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, I kept going because I thought, okay, it must be just an intricate setup. Like I must need to be, invested a little bit in some information in order for it to come together. And I literally could not even keep my eyes open during the second episode. And that was me like watching it and trying to also keep myself alert by looking at some socials because it was like, I can't. And then I was like, this is stupid.
Okay.
That was my thought.
Yeah.
I know. I feel like I'm disappointed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I wanted to like this show.
Yeah.
I wanted to.
I thought the first episode was reasonably paced, which is, a plus for Apple TV because they're either really good at it, like Severance or Ted Lasso.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. Right.
Or they're bad at it, like Slow Horses.
Oh, yes. My gosh. The slow horses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like those horses are not walking.
No.
They are sleeping.
Yeah. They've laid
sleeping
down.
Horses. Yes.
That's right. Yes.
Another show I desperately really wanted to watch. Yeah. I wanted to like that show.
I wanted to like it so much too. I love Gary Oldman.
I know.
Love Gary Oldman.
It had so much potential.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Anyway. But none of these rooms seem particularly crowded.
No.
So
like with entertainment or plot or good editing. Listen, I'm going to be.
Or people.
Or people. I'm going to be like.
You're a little snarky this whole episode. Yay. Yay. I love Snarky Jackie. Snarky Jackie is one of my favorites.
Oh, Lord. Okay.
All right,
yes, you're right. There was not many crowded rooms.
No. So let's talk about the cast.
Yes.
Tom Holland, Spider-Man himself, is Danny Sullivan, the prime suspect in a shooting. Mm-hmm. This is his second project with Apple TV. The first was a movie called Cherry about a young war vet struggling after a tour of duty, which I had not heard of.
I did not see that.
Or see. And based on this, I don't know if I need to.
Well, I don't know, because Tom Holland's great.
Tom Holland is great.
Yeah, so I don't think this was a him problem. In fact, I heard through some chatter that Tom Holland expressed in the kindest way possible that he was surprised how it turned out.
Oh, okay.
That maybe it was not what he expected.
Okay.
Based on how he acted. Oh. That he had placed some effort into certain things and really expected the edit and how it was going to present to be different.
Okay.
That's
fair. Mm-hmm. Okay. So Amanda Seyfried is the interrogator Raya Goodwin, and we talked about her when we covered The Dropout.
Yes.
Because she played the Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes.
Yes.
She got her start in soap operas, really kind of went big in Mean Girls as Karen Smith.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was like her first like really big like outside of soap operas role. Mm-hmm. Emily Rawson is Candy, Danny's mother. That was one of the chief complaints I saw when looking at like critical reviews is that she's not old enough. Well, she's 37. She's only 10 years older than Tom Holland.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that she's not old enough
or he's not young enough.
He's not young enough.
Right. Because he's supposed to be playing a 17-year-old.
Yeah, like a high school student. I get that he does look young.
Right.
And I could suspend my belief for that one.
I could, but the mom needed to, even if she was supposed to be 37, especially in the 70s, she needed to look a little older.
She needed to look older in order to help it out. Because I understand they had to cast somebody who could play the 20s in one timeline and the high school student in another. To be fair, they were like seniors.
Right.
So, I mean, they're close to being adults. I mean, you know.
It's only 2 years difference between the,
yes,
when the things are happening
and the
remembrances. Yes.
Yeah. So I can understand. I thought Tom Holland, maybe he does look a little too old but they always cast older people to play the high school students because, that makes sense for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
you're right. They didn't make her look age appropriate for what needed to happen.
For what it seems like she must have been through. She should look a little more weathered.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's best known as Fiona Gallagher in Shameless. And she also made a pretty decent but totally under the radar pop album in 2007.
Interesting.
Called Inside Out. I listened to a couple songs. And it's not like necessarily something that I would go to a lot, but it was kind of interesting.
Oh, that's interesting because I did see on here that she was in Phantom of the Opera, the reboot version, not reboot version, I should say, but like a more contemporary movie, Phantom of the Opera. So I can imagine she would sing.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah.
So,
and then Will Chase is Marlon Reed, Danny's cruel stepfather. He looked really familiar to me.
Yeah.
Because he was in all 8 episodes of Hulu's Dope Sick as Michael Friedman, the CEO of Purdue Pharma.
Oh my gosh, that's why.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Well, because he looked age appropriate.
Yes, he did.
He did. Now he is older though.
Right.
Like significantly.
Right.
So,
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Like I could have bought him as a mid 70s, late 30 something, early 40 something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I didn't buy her as a late 30s.
No.
Mid 70s.
But they do this. Why do they always cast it this way? The man, it can be older, and the woman has to be super, super young.
Misogyny.
I mean, Will Chase, he's 53.
Yeah.
I mean, and he definitely doesn't look his age. He looks younger.
Sure.
But nevertheless, why? Why do they do this? Ugh,
yeah.
So annoying.
All right, so let's recap.
Okay.
It's super brief.
Yeah, I You think?
Yeah. Danny seems troubled. We meet him as he's embarking on a plan to attack someone. And we see him a little younger, being bullied by a step-parent and classmates. And then we learn that even younger, he'd endured the loss of an identical twin. So a lot going on there. The first episode alludes to deeper mysteries that we don't yet understand. What happened to Danny's landlord and housemate at the boarding house? Who was the man that was unsuccessfully, mostly, shot at 30 Rockefeller Center? Why did Danny's mother stay with her terrible husband who was cruel to her son and seemed not to work? There are a lot of questions and not a lot of answers.
No, definitely not a lot of answers.
No. So critics hated it, much like you.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But audiences, over 1,000 ratings on Rotten Tomatoes, audiences rated it 92%. So,
what, 92?
Yes. So they liked it much better.
I don't even
You don't understand that? That's fine.
I mean, I often do understand the Rotten Tomatoes stuff, but that seems like wonky.
Uh-huh. It does. And the chief complaint beside Emily Rawson.
Oh, yeah. Well,
no.
That would be easily overlooked. That would be like a small, if I was to critique it to make it better, this is what I would do. But I don't even know how you get to that kind of critique when you have so many other more important problems.
Yeah, well, I mean, just the pacing is off and it's convoluted and the whole thing.
And I'm talking about age.
Yeah.
Amanda Siegfried, she's supposed to be a professor of psychology that's consulting with the police department in the 70s?
See, and this is the thing that seemed really weird to me because then I read, no, she's not a professor. The professor was a joke.
What?
Okay. That she was really just an interrogator that worked for the police department. So I don't even know. It was so confusing.
Well, and I know that we haven't watched the whole thing.
Right.
And sometimes when I have this initial reaction, I know, okay, maybe the payoff is worth it. But I heard so much that kind of confirmed that the payoff
it
really
doesn't.
holding water, then I was like,
maybe I'm just not going to spend my time on it.
Maybe I'm not going to spend my time on it. But
that's
like,
fine.
I don't know. She just didn't look old enough. She looks the same age as him.
Right.
Which is totally fine for the suspect and interrogator to be the same age. But she's treating him like a kid.
Right.
That's in trouble.
Right.
Like she's the wizened psychological expert.
Right. That's fair.
And then it's the 70s.
Yeah.
And not that there weren't women who were psychologists. They were rarely pulled into the man's world to do a man's job, if you get my drift.
Yes.
So.
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay.
So,
well,
much of the story is set in New York City, and it was also filmed there.
Okay. Yeah,
So,
I saw that. I was like, that looks legit.
It was really impressive given there were a lot of people who had to be in period costumes. Like a lot. And they had to make the city look really dirty because litter was a huge thing in the 70s.
Yes.
I mean, if you go to New York City now, of course, there's some litter because there's a lot of people there.
Yeah.
But there's been a huge effort to make sure that the city is very clean and welcoming. And, and it was not that way in the 70s.
No.
So they did a good job with that. And there's all these period vehicles.
Yeah.
Even the police vehicles and things. I was like, oh, they did a really good job. That must have been a pain in the butt.
Yeah. Right?
So, yeah.
It looked legit. The signage. Now, some of that was probably CGI, right? That they did after the fact. But it looked so freaking good. Yeah.
Yeah. And they really did film in 30 Rockefeller Plaza.
I mean, it's cool. I mean, everything about the set and all of that stuff was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some things to like. This role actually caused Tom Holland to take a year-long break from acting.
Okay, talk to me about this, because this is kind of what I heard softly through the grapevine, that he went to some dark places.
Yes.
And that maybe had contributed to his annoyance about how it turned out.
Sure.
Because it didn't quite showcase the depth of what he gave to it.
Sure. He was also an executive producer on this. He wasn't just like the lead actor. And he told Unilad's Get a Job series, "It's no secret that my show has been so horribly reviewed."
Yeah.
So he was really aware of
it.
And he said that he was less concerned about the opinion of reviewers and more concerned about the lessons a viewer might be able to take away from it. He really wants people, if you're feeling poorly, to be able to get help. That's kind of what he was hoping to get across. And that he told Entertainment Weekly, learning about mental health and the power of it and speaking to psychiatrists about Danny's struggles has been something that's been so informative in my own life. And that he really wants viewers to have respect and empathy for people going through a mental health crisis. And that get help if you need it.
Yeah.
That was his big takeaway.
Well, that's very interesting, because nothing about that first episode screamed that this is a mental health problem.
It is. Well, we're going to get to that.
I'm so glad that's on your list, because I haven't got to talk about this.
We're gonna get into it just barely, because I'll have spoiler and skip ahead. And
okay, all right,
that stuff.
okay.
But we'll get there.
Yeah.
After this break, we'll be right back with Is It True? Psychology Break and Real Life.
So here's how it works. Christy wrecks her search history. Hey, an essay. We promise it's nothing more nefarious than a podcast. To find out what's true, some of the psychological motivations behind the characters' actions, and real-life applications that relate to our topic. I have no idea what Christy decided to look up. Could be the same thing that captured my curiosity, or something I never thought of.
All right. Is it true? So, well, is this true?
I don't think so.
It's inspired by a true story.
Oh, okay.
But you have told me you don't know the secret. And because I did the research, I know the secret because I've done the research, not because I've watched far enough in to learn the secret. Okay. So if you don't want it spoiled for you, you should skip ahead
8 minutes and 50 seconds.
And then you won't have this spoiled for you. So go ahead and skip ahead, and then you can listen to the next thing what we're talking about. But so it's based on, I didn't even want to say the name of the book that it was based on because it spoils it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it's based on a 1981 nonfiction book by a man named David Keyes, and it's The Minds of Billy Milligan.
Okay.
Okay, so It's not a straight adaptation. It's an inspired by situation, because Billy Milligan in 1977, not 1979, was a 22-year-old who was arrested for the kidnapping, robbery, and sexual assault of 3 women on the Ohio State campus. Okay?
Right.
Billy Milligan insisted that the robberies were performed by a man named Reagan, and that the sexual assaults were caused by a woman named Adelina. Okay? He had dissociative identity disorder.
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as I read The Minds of Billy Milligan, I'm like, oh, he's got DID.
Yeah. And I actually had heard a little bit about this story, the Ohio State rapist and kidnapper who had, as they would have said back then, multiple personality disorder.
Right.
But now we call it dissociative. But yeah.
Right.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. But you know what? I'm telling you, there are other films about this that are way more fun.
Well, I mean, there's a whole show, The United States of Tara.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Super excellent, about a woman struggling with dissociative identity disorder and how she handles it. And my understanding after watching that entire series is that this is not exactly how things played out. Or it's not a normal way that they play out.
No, well, of course not, because the vast majority of people with DID are not murderers or rapists or killers.
And they don't tend to have a lot of interaction between the personalities.
Oh, they wouldn't. In fact, that is... Okay. Hold on.
I mean, I don't know.
This is why they switched it to dissociative. The idea that multiple personalities means they don't contact each other. They only know each other exists because of the consequences they see in front of them when the other personality is forward or whatever, however you want to describe it. But we understand that, as we do often, things are not black and white. There's a spectrum. People can dissociate. And that dissociative process can take several forms.
Right.
But you also then have to wonder how much of the dissociation is manipulation.
Right.
And how much of it might be some, just plain psychopathy or some antisocial narcissistic behaviors, and like how much of that. So like, I mean, I'm not a diagnostician of this.
Right.
But I would just say that like, no, I wouldn't call this by any stretch normal, but I wouldn't say it's like out of the realm of possibility.
Sure.
That he might think that there's somebody else, because if he's got like if he's hallucinating it.
Right. And I think that's the key
let's just
here.
say it. Fight Club is better.
Fight Club is better.
Okay, but I recognize they're trying to be inspired by like a true story, but like the idea that like, okay, you can actually dissociate enough that you can interact with
another
personality is not totally crazy idea.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's not out of the realm of possibility necessarily, but anyway, so Billy Milligan in 1978, December, was actually acquitted of the crimes, even though there was a multitude of evidence, because he was considered insane
and could not be
and not responsible for it. And it was the first decision of a person with dissociative identity disorder not being held responsible for something that another personality did, and it remains pretty controversial. Now,
yes. This is the part I remember about this whole thing.
And Billy Milligan was institutionalized in Central Ohio Psychiatric Hospital. And in July of 1986, he escaped, went to Washington State, lived under an alias. He was there for a few months with a roommate. That roommate disappeared. We don't know what happened to him. Nobody's still found him.
Oh.
We don't know. He may have murdered him. One of the personalities may have murdered his.
Yeah.
And then he went to Florida after his roommate disappeared, and that's when he got picked up, and they sent him back to this psychiatric institute. In 1988, he was discharged because psychiatrists concluded that many of his personalities had fused into one harmless one as a result of therapy, and he was no longer a danger to society. So he went into outpatient treatment for 3 years, and in 1991, they released him from all state supervision.
Wow.
So as far as we know, He was okay
He's
after
fine.
that. He passed away in 2014 of cancer, but concerning a little.
I mean, it is. I mean, what you hope that's true.
Yeah,
You hope that actually they figured out how to help him in ways, because the devastating part is that like somebody who has this disorder,
Right.
you know, is dealing with the fact that another part of themselves is doing heinous things, which you would think would be morally difficult to deal with,
Right.
to know that. And you would hope that like you could get better and that you could be like, we have a control of this. Right. I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough. It's
tough.
difficult because I don't know, everything about it. I know what I've seen.
Yeah.
In television. I know that some of the things that I've watched have been deemed by professionals who deal with this as accurate or inaccurate.
Right.
This doesn't fit with the more accurate portrayals.
Yeah, that
I've
would
seen,
make sense.
But
this would make sense because and I do remember looking at this trial a little bit, just the decision about it, because
Right.
it was like it's an ethics thing.
Right.
Like, how do we hold people responsible? At what point are they incompetent? What is the best result? Because basically what you've done is, if you have deemed that he is not responsible because it's somebody else, even if it's within him, you've now, by telling him he has to be institutionalized, you still punished him.
well, right.
After
but
saying he hasn't done it. So if it's true that there's a separate part of him that he doesn't know
Right.
that has done that, he's still imprisoned.
Right,
for
because
this person,
because
yes.
he's got to be imprisoned because the other person
Right.
within him needs to be imprisoned.
Right. That's just,
Yeah.
but the ethics, like, and the practicalities, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, wow.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not going to pass
I'm
judgment.
so
but the
glad that you told me the secret.
Okay, good.
Do you know why? Because as they were sitting there talking, I had this feeling that that's where it was going. And
Okay.
all I could think was Edward Norton did it better. Both times. Because
Yeah.
he's done this both.
Right.
He's done the DID thing twice.
Wow, what other show did he do?
So, you have like the Fight Club,
Right.
right? Him and Brad Pitt. So he was also in Primal Fear.
Oh, okay. Okay. I've not seen that, so I didn't make the connection.
Oh,
You're
well,
like-
I've spoiled it
Oh, well, that's all
by
right.
telling you that this is a
It's
part
been
of
out a
it.
while.
It's
It's
been out a
fine.
very, very long time. But here's the thing. It's still entertaining.
Yeah, okay.
Because here's what I won't do. I won't tell you the details of his
Sure.
disorder.
Okay.
But he plays someone with DID
Okay.
who is accused of a crime,
Okay.
who he doesn't think it's him.
Right,
And
because it's a different
because
personality.
it's a different personality.
Oh, interesting.
And I won't spoil it beyond
Okay.
that.
Okay. Awesome.
Unless you want me to.
No, not right now.
Okay.
All right. So if you skipped through our spoiler section right there, welcome back. If you didn't, you know. All right. So when they come out of the subway next to Radio City Music Hall, on the marquee are some big names.
Yeah.
Old Blue Eyes, Frank Sinatra, and Mr. Jazz, Muddy Waters. So I looked. Were they really performing?
Ooh.
I'm like, this is a fun and easy thing to fact check. It's not
Yes.
as easy as I thought it was going to be. But I did fact check it. So Frank Sinatra was listed as performing in the Crowded Room at Radio City Music Hall May 17th through the 25th, presumably in 1979.
Right. Okay.
I couldn't find that Frank Sinatra played Radio City Music Hall at any point in May ever.
Oh, wow.
The closest was October of 1978. And I couldn't find that he was scheduled to perform at Radio City Music Hall at that time.
Interesting.
However, Muddy Waters was listed as performing June 29th, 1979, and he did perform at Radio City Music Hall that day.
Okay.
So I don't know why the discrepancy, or just like this was a big deal. He was a big deal, and
Right, maybe.
somebody that people would recognize.
Yeah, maybe so.
I mean,
Make it easy.
They took liberties, I guess. All right, so the man that Danny and Ariana are following comes out of a business, OTB.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know what that is.
Well, I didn't know either.
Okay, so it's off-track betting, which basically means you can bet on racehorses, not at the track.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
most of the time you have to go to the track to actually place the bet.
Right.
So in New York State, they have off-track betting offices, OTB, and there are basically nonprofits. So they take bets. About 77% of that goes into a pool to pay winners.
Okay.
And then the winners pay a surcharge of 5 or 6% to
Okay.
be able to get their money. And then the money that's left over gets used to run the actual operation, but then some of it also goes back to benefit the racetracks and supporting the racing industry. And then the participating counties and cities, as well as the state, get some funds from that. And then after they've paid all of their operating expenses for the year, the counties, cities, and state get more money.
Oh,
so
wow.
it's basically a nonprofit that
Yeah.
supports the area.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm like,
Interesting.
it's kind of like the lottery.
Yeah, that
right?
makes sense.
Yeah. So when they're in the police station, one of the detectives is absolutely sure that Danny is a serial killer. And his partner laughs and says, reading one book on a serial killer has made him an expert. So we know there's a lot of books about serial killers now.
But was there
particularly
one
from
then?
the 70s. Yeah, I was like, were there books? There actually were. There were
Okay.
a few, and the ones that may have been available to read about that time. So Truman Capote's In Cold Blood,
Okay.
that's a serial killer book that was out in 1965. And then there were a couple on the Manson family, Helter Skelter and the Family. There was one called Serpentine that was about a Europe and Southeast Asia serial killer. And then there was also The Michigan Murders, written by Edward Keyes. And I'm not sure if he's related to the guy who wrote The Minds of Billy Milligan, even though they have the same last name, spelled the same way. I don't know if they're related to one another
well,
or
that's
not.
interesting.
But that
Maybe,
one came out in 1976. So
Okay.
there
So-
would have been a few that this detective could have read.
Yes, but this is set in what year?
1979.
Yeah, okay. Okay, they just barely made it. Because the term serial killer really only came onto the scene in a lecture in 1994 or 1974.
Okay. So, yeah.
Boy, they're just under the buzzer. But like a book would have had to be written after that used the term, and it was still kind of becoming a thing.
Right. It was still kind of new.
It wasn't a used terminology like outside of the FBI
Sure.
and professionals. So they're taking another set of liberties.
That's right. Fair. Danny goes to take his stepfather's wallet on a Saturday night. His stepfather's drunk, and he goes to take his wallet to fund illicit activities. And the national anthem was playing on the television.
Oh yeah, because it was closing. It was the end of it.
Yeah, that was the thing.
End of it. I'm saying that like people know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
You might not. Yes, channels like ended for the night.
Yes, because it was too expensive to keep them running overnight and have somebody always there. So depending on when and where you lived, bigger cities would go later, but a lot would turn off for the night, but sometime between midnight and 2 a.m.
Yep.
And then they'd come back on at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. And they'd play the national anthem and then it'd go to color bars.
Yeah, color bars or static.
Maybe static.
Maybe static, depending on where you live. But they played the national anthem and had the, patriotic sort of.
There's a great Golden Girls scene where Rose can't sleep. And so she's got the little portable TV in front of her in the kitchen. And it goes to that and she's all sleepy and she stands up, puts her hand over her heart and is like swaying. And then Blanche comes in like, you've got to sleep. Like, it's funny.
Aw. Yeah. So I was like, oh, if you're a younger listener, that might not be a thing you remember.
Yeah, that's true.
Though evidently, if smaller rural towns even still like did that up until like 2009.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some that still turned off.
Very small local stations.
Yeah. And so what they were trying to take from Danny's stepfather's wallet was his ATM card.
I mean,
It was new.
that was the only delightful part of it.
It was
That they were like this cash machine.
Uh-huh.
Ooh.
So I
And
was
I was
like,
like, oh, that's kind of cute.
like, I don't remember cash machines, but it was near New York. I mean, they were like basically in a suburb of New York City.
Yeah.
So maybe.
Well, yeah.
So I wanted to find out.
When did they start? Like, I was wondering, how new was this then?
September 1969 was the first ATM opening, and they
Okay.
were called DocuTellers or DocuTel cash dispensing machines then, not ATMs. And it's not an ATM machine.
No, it's not either. It's not an ATM machine. Don't say it.
Don't say it.
Don't say it.
Don't say it.
It's not an automated teller machine.
No, it is not. It's an ATM.
That's it.
That's right. Chemical Bank was the first one that opened it. They are now owned by Chase Bank.
Okay.
And that was in New York City.
Okay.
So
they
they
got
were
a little
a little
legit with
close, right? And it was actually a really big deal because if you needed cash, you had to go to the bank.
Yeah.
And most banks closed at the latest at 3 p.m.
Yeah.
Chase Manhattan had their first cash machine at Grand Central Station in 1973. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that in 1977, when those particular events were taking place, that there might have been a cash machine there. It blows my mind that they could figure out how to work that because they didn't have the internet.
Well, no,
They must have used phone lines or something, but I don't even know.
Look, on the screen, though, it would tell you what to do. All the instructions were on the machine.
I know it told you what to do, but like how you have to know that somebody took money out of the bank account at a ATM and know that at the bank miles and miles away. They had to have a way to communicate.
Oh, yeah. It was all phone. They didn't have open internet.
Right.
They had They
Yes,
had closed
this is
internet.
true.
They even had email.
Yeah.
Within a company.
Right.
So it was all.
Yeah.
But you're right. It was all. It wasn't satellite based. It
Right.
was all landline based.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, heck, your fiber now. It's like we're going back to that, right? Because we realize, hey, that really is faster. But to have a
a physical line.
But those
Yeah.
physical lines would carry
Right.
so much
All
data.
kinds of stuff.
However, it wouldn't be instant.
No.
It wouldn't be instant.
No.
It would be, but those data packets that they were sending were, pretty decent. I mean, we did go to the moon on this. So.
I mean, we did. we did. And I get that, but it's even still like
it still blows your mind. Well, I always thought we had corded remotes to our TVs way longer than we needed to.
I mean, evidently. But you know who was the remote for our TV when I was a kid?
My legs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And that's remained true even after we had a remote.
This is true. They couldn't find it.
Or they just didn't care.
They just you do it.
Or, hey, go get the remote.
Yep. All right. So the boys, Danny and his friends, bought a variety of marijuana called Panama Red. This is their illicit activities in the park. That was a real variety, and it was very popular in the 1960s and 1970s because it was quite potent.
Okay. I figured that's why they wanted it.
Right. I mean, I figured so too, but I was like, is that really one? Yes, that's really one. It was really popular at that time. It actually is much rarer now because Panama, when cocaine trafficking took off, they stopped growing so much marijuana.
Interesting.
Yeah. Danny's friend Johnny tells Danny, "Trust me, grasshopper."
Yeah, I thought that was cute. But
it was cute. And I was like, what is that from? Because it seems to me like it was from
Karate Kid.
Yeah. Right? That's what I thought. And I'm like, well, Karate Kid didn't come out until the 80s.
Oh, I didn't even think. I really didn't even put that together.
Yeah, it wasn't out yet. I was like, so why are they doing
how did he know?
Okay. That's why I wanted to know. I'm like, is this a plot hole or is there something else? Oh, well, it turns out that there was a show from 1972 to 1975 called Kung Fu. And one of the catchphrases was, "Patience, young grasshopper." So it was
Kung Fu.
Kung Fu would have been something they would have seen. And so he did a misquote of Kung Fu when he said, "Trust me, grasshopper," because it was "Patience, young grasshopper."
But it's still a play on the thing.
Right.
Which is why it was so cool in Karate Kid.
Right.
Oh, that's
Exactly.
cute. Okay.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. I'm with you. Yeah. How about that?
So I was surprised to hear that Danny's family had an answering machine in 1977. Because Danny's at home and the stepfathers realize that there's money missing from the account much quicker than they thought. And because I remember my family getting an answering machine for the first time in the 80s. Like, I remember, like, they were like, we're getting the answering machine.
Yeah, I don't know. I felt like it was one of those newer things, but not. I did not think it was before this time. I mean, I didn't think. Wait, how do I say this? I thought they probably existed. They were just newer.
Sure. And that is actually the case.
Okay.
So
all right.
I can imagine it being ubiquitous in your house because you're a little bit younger than I am and your parents tended to be early adopters of.
Well, yeah, my dad was in information technology.
You're right.
So we had a lot of stuff kind of way early.
Right. So in the 70s is when they first started having answering machines available. The first one was introduced in 1971 for home use, residential use. It was about the mid 70s when they quote unquote got cheap enough for people to start having them in their house. Now, cheap enough was $125 to $600, which
sounds about right.
Today's money, $125 is like $740. This is a lot of money. So even like the low end, they were pretty expensive.
Yeah.
But by 1978, there were about 400,000 units in the United States, which is way more than I thought. Yeah. And then in the 80s,
it took over.
They came down to like $25.
Yeah.
And almost everybody could have it.
Yeah.
And now nobody has an answering machine because we all have it on our phone. Right.
We have satellite-based answering machine.
I say that. My parents have an answering machine.
Do they really? That's pretty. Do you remember when you would like get a new roommate or like your living situation would change and you'd have to like do the pithy answering machine thing with your roommates, or do the thing?
No, I didn't because my college had voicemail. Like we do now. And you could, when you called the room, if nobody answered, you could press 1 or 2 and leave a message specifically for the individual roommate. So,
and that's right, because you went from the dorm pretty much.
Right.
To being married.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I went through a few roommate iterations.
Right, because you
apartment.
you lived off campus while you were in college.
Well, both. I lived on campus and then I lived off campus.
Yeah. Right, yeah. So I lived on campus and then I moved in with my husband. So
that's funny.
He was my fiance at the time.
Hey,
but
whatever. Timelines.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the whole answering thing. I mean, my dad was an early adopter of absolutely everything. Right. Including the VCR and the VCR recorder.
No, yeah.
I mean, 1977, 1978, I think he got one.
Okay.
All right. So and he paid like $3,000 for it then?
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah. That's a lot of money.
But he was so excited about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a lot of money. I want to say my parents had a videotape recorder before they had an answering machine. I want to say they had a Betamax before we had a home answering machine.
The Betamax, first. And then,
Right.
I know. Really cool old tech. Yeah. It's just fun.
All of the sources that we use to inform our discussion here on Killer Fun Podcast can be found on our social media. Join us on Facebook at Killer Fun Podcast, exploring the intersection of crime and entertainment. You can find us on Twitter at Killer Fun Pod, or you can send us an email at killerfunpodcast@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to share a link to whatever information you're looking for. We love to hear from you. You might learn a little something too. Psychology break. All right. So I'm going to do the little spoiler. Skip ahead 10 seconds. We're not talking about dissociative identity disorder in the psychology break because it was not evident in the first episode.
Oh, okay.
So,
Gotcha.
yeah. Danny told his friend Johnny that the grief over the loss of his twin brother kind of came in waves. This is what he expressed. He's like, is it bad? He's like, well, it comes in waves and I never know when it's going to be bad. And that's very normal. We talk about grief a lot on the show because grief is very often a motivation for the kind of issues that people are having and maybe why they do crime.
A lot of times there's like unresolved or complicated grief.
Right.
And, yeah.
And it's normal. Haley Thomas wrote an article for Chicory Counseling where she works and said it's normal to feel kind of okay one day and then really awful another day, and it can be very unpredictable. And so she said there was some common myths about grief that she wanted to address. Ooh. And that grief is linear and has 5 stages.
Yeah.
Okay. So we hear about this all the time, the 5 stages of grief, blah, blah, blah. It turns out Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who developed the model, didn't develop it for people who had a loved one who passed away. She developed it for the people who were dying. That the 5 stages of grief that you read about, denial and acceptance and whatever. I don't remember what they all are. They're all there. It wasn't for the people who were being left behind. It was for the person who was actively dying.
Right. Okay.
Like, okay.
I mean, that doesn't necessarily negate its generalizability to like those who are.
Sure.
But I also don't think it was developed as a linear stages, the way that we tend to think of them in pop psychology as being these linear stages. No, that's not.
No, these are the stages you're going to go through.
Yeah.
They may not be in this particular order, except you're probably going to end with acceptance because, you're about to die.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're talking about people who are, actively like in hospice and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, and even they can be helpful to understand because it gives you at least some language around how you might be feeling.
Sure.
But they're not linear and they overlap.
Sure.
Like it's more like a feelings wheel situation.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You might spin through those stages a few times. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Grief is something you get over is a myth because it looks different for everybody. Basically, it's just there is no timeline for it. No. And going with that, the third myth is feeling sad months or years after a loss means that you haven't healed. I thought it was interesting that she said that could actually be a sign of healing because in the initial aftermath of a loss, a lot of people will tamp down their feelings and not feel them. Yeah. And the ability to feel them and have sadness either without judgment or regardless of judgment of others is actually a sign of healing.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as you're not dysfunctional.
Right.
If you're dysfunctional at that timeline, maybe now the grief might need some outside help. Right. Because you shouldn't be 3 years down the road from it and not really, but from certain grief. There are certain griefs that are the timeline you just naturally think of as needing even longer. Right. Just generally. But like if you're not able to function and you're stuck, then maybe. Right. But there's a lot of griefs that like we think of grieving as we need to wait until it's dysfunctional 2, 3 years, 4, 5, 6
to treat it.
And it's like maybe grief is something that we could reach out for just help dealing with sort of right away. Right. Why wait till the wound is infected? Yeah. Before we clean it.
Yeah. That's good. And, you can be quote unquote over your grief and then have a life event that triggers it again. Oh, yeah. Even happy ones, somebody dies. I wish I had my mom to talk to, right. Or I wish my mom was here to see this exciting thing that's happening.
Exactly.
Whatever. All right. So, but the loss of a twin can be particularly profound.
Oh, yes.
So there is, I did not know this, the Twinless Twins Support Group International. It was founded in 1984.
Wow.
So is
84.
a whole like organization to help people who have lost their twin. They did say that identical twins tend to feel it a little more acutely than fraternal twins. It can be very devastating to a fraternal twin, of course, but it's maybe more devastating for them than a regular sibling that would be several years apart, but an identical twin is a little more
and I know that people hate it when we compare darkness to darkness,
right?
Like I get that, but on the other hand, you have to sort of admit there is actually a spectrum of impact,
right?
And the impact is different for an identical twin,
right?
You know, and because that person has looked at themselves,
right? Yeah.
For all their lives.
Right.
That reflection back when they're looking at their like closest sibling and best friend is literally their own face.
Right.
To not have that, to have no one else in the world knows what that's like except an identical twin. And all of a sudden to be able to turn to somebody and feel completely seen because they're reflecting you back.
Right.
Weird.
Yes.
It's a weirdness.
Right. And they tend to have a loneliness.
Yes.
That's
what I'm going towards.
They've been basically looking in a mirror, looking at their twin, and now they have this really intense loneliness.
Yeah. There's this sense of but we conquer the world. Right. Which can, go awry in a different direction too. But like, that but we are, and that partnership is, particularly strong.
Yes. And the loss of particularly an identical twin, and particularly when young, can be linked to an increased risk of mental health disorders. So there was a very interesting study on eLife Sciences about twins having been lost. And so twins tend to share an early life experience and have a stronger emotional bond than typical siblings. And so they looked at the Swedish Twin Registry, which I didn't even realize that they did, but Sweden has evidently done this whole registry where they have a lot of information about twins in particular, and they wanted to find out if the risk of psychiatric disorders was higher in a lost twin. And spoiler alert, yes.
Yes, yeah.
Basically, particularly right after the loss, they're more likely to have a mental issue and need help with a psychiatric disorder. It was far more pronounced if it happened in childhood or early adulthood. They were much more likely to have a psychiatric issue. Over 40, that declined quite a bit.
That makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense.
Environmental reasons.
Right.
Because
they probably don't live together or are less likely to live together.
Yes, that's true. I think I'm thinking more about the parental situation.
Sure.
Because, the devastation, that is caused to a parent and a sibling when a child in the family is lost is awful. But when a twin is lost, every time the parents look at you now,
they see their missing child.
Yeah. And the parental support for the remaining twin has been shown to be a stress. That it's not as strong. There's the parents dealing with their own stuff.
Right. Yes. And it makes it hard for them to help their child.
And it makes it that much harder.
Right.
And a little bit more like sometimes there might be that moment of resentment and then that overwash of guilt. Right? Because you're looking at the one, so it's making you think of the other one. And then there's this wash of guilt, like, what, oh my gosh, am I wishing my current one dead? Like, as a parent, it's also weird.
Right.
There's also, like, this weirdness about it.
Right.
And so the child, it's not as bonding over the trauma. Right. And where you can bind together as it might be in a different situation, which is so, oh my God, so sad.
Yeah, it's really sad.
But
it's very tough.
As adults, though, the twins probably have separated their styles enough. They've become their own people enough. The family support isn't, it's not as like, oh my
Fraught.
gosh,
Yeah.
yeah. Like there's a little bit.
I thought it was interesting. They had a they called it the hazard ratio of who needed psychiatric treatment shortly after the loss of a sibling. So for an identical twin, it was 2.45. For a fraternal twin, it was about half, 1.29.
Okay.
And a full sibling was 1.0.
Okay,
So
that's
you're
interesting.
slightly more likely to have a psychiatric issue if you lose a sibling than if you don't.
Right.
Particularly young, but it's more than double.
Right. If you were having an identical twin.
So I thought it was interesting. And
I mean, it is
maybe explain
interesting.
some things,
Well,
assuming he existed.
Assuming he existed. Yes, we have to put that out there. But yeah, that is interesting because that gives people an ability to say, okay, now we understand who might need, like to prioritize some support.
Right.
For things like if you're like in a frontline, either ministry or anything, if you come across this, it should be like a heads up. If that was an identical twin, maybe that family needs like a different priority list or, something else.
Right. They maybe need a little more support.
Yeah.
Right. Real life. So after the incident at Rockefeller Plaza, Danny returns to the boarding house, and in his frustration, he breaks a mirror. And this is an understandable response because he's frustrated and scared. It is not a very helpful one.
Well, no, you can cut yourself.
So it seems like it would be a way to relieve tension.
Yeah, to do it.
Venting of, upsetness.
It's like a form of self-harm though.
Well, yes, basically is what they're talking about is that it seems like it'd be helpful, but it's really not. And that this Evolve treatment said a 1999 study suggested that people who punched something when upset actually became angrier and more aggressive later than those who didn't punch anything.
Oh, like in general.
Right.
Not just the mirror.
Right.
Because that's my thought. Like the mirror thing particularly.
Yeah, no.
You see yourself and you actually attack yourself.
Right.
So that's like a different form of...
Right.
It's not just a punch the wall or I'm so mad or...
Well, and they talk about that sometimes people hit themselves when they're angry, either as like punishment or to give themselves pain to distract them from their own feelings. But that if you consistently struggle with anger where you feel like you want to hit something, you might consider that there might be a mental health issue involved. It could be something more complex like oppositional defiant disorder, disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, or conduct disorder. It could also be something more commonplace like depression or anxiety.
Yeah. It could be a medical issue,
Really?
If you have high blood sugar, if you have things a
yeah.
bi-directional nature with your mental emotional state.
Sure.
If you're running on 11 all the time, then you are building up your emotion on top of like what feels like fight or flight.
Yes.
And so it's kind of like, maybe you need to simmer down. Well, maybe you literally need to simmer down like your blood.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe your blood's making you crazy.
Yeah. Like
Yes. Yeah. If your partner regularly hits things when they're angry, this is a risk factor for domestic abuse and a sign of domestic abuse and something that needs to be addressed. Yes. And we see it a lot on television. We see this thing happen, but it's actually far less common than it's depicted on television. It is a TV trope.
Yeah, a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But I have kicked a rock before.
I mean,
and I have.
I've screamed at something.
Now, screaming can help.
Yeah.
Screaming can help.
Screaming can help. Yeah.
I know.
I mean, it doesn't change the situation, but it vents it in a way that is, like less destructive.
In Schitt's Creek, where the dad is trying to like invest in new things, and so he has this meeting with someone who runs this scream therapy thing, where they all come in and scream. Oh my gosh! Sorry, that was a funny scene. Okay,
I mean, it's not dissimilar to the places where you can go and throw an axe.
Oh yeah,
or a shooting range, or where you go and you break dishes.
Oh my gosh, doesn't that sound fun?
It sounds really fun. actually really want to do that. Not because I'm angry at anything, but I think that I would be delighted in this. So how do you cope with anger in a more constructive way? Bustle has an article. How to help. And this is interesting up at top. A 2015 study found that American juries reward men who display anger, but penalize women who exhibit rage.
Oh, yes. Oh, do you want to open this Pandora's box?
I don't know that I do.
No,
I just thought it was interesting.
It's real. It's true. Go seek out Adam Grant's work on this. It's so important. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to temper.
Okay.
Temper.
Okay. Yeah. We tend to focus on negative things, but we also tend to push those things away and not deal with them when we have these negative emotions. So we both focus on them and then refuse to talk about them. So if we can take a moment to process our feelings, sit with it, feel the feelings.
Feel the feeling.
It literally helps. You literally will feel like you don't need to hit something if you sit with your negative emotions and feel them, and then you will feel better.
Yeah. Validate them.
Yes.
And give yourself a time limit if you need it.
Sure.
Fine.
So you know what this reminded me of was grieving as in Shrinking.
Oh, yes.
So there was a character in the wonderful Apple TV show Shrinking.
Yes.
Another one.
One.
Apple TV, they're either great or they're not good.
I mean, it's very interesting
The
how
Crowded
that works.
Room, not good.
Not good.
Shrinking,
Fantastic.
amazing. So good, really enjoyable. But there's a character and she gets some advice to set a 15-minute timer, listen to sad music, and just sob and grieve and let it all out, feel her feelings, and then she could put it away and go about her day.
Yeah.
And for as long as she needed, she could take 15 minutes every day to just weep.
It's an amazing, powerful
It's
thing.
so cool. Yeah. Yes. The only way over an emotion is often through it. And they suggested guided journals. So if you found journaling not to be helpful in grief or anger or frustration in the past, perhaps try a guided journal. It's something that has prompts to help you decide what to write about.
Well, and also to stop you from writing the same thing over
Sure.
and over and over again, because there is a difference between feeling your feeling and wallowing in it.
Sure.
And allowing it to take over. Because validating it doesn't mean you elect it dictator.
Yes. There you go. Fair. All right. So Danny's stepfather is a bad stepfather.
Oh, terrible. Yes.
He's really bad. So let's talk about some of those red flags
Okay.
that he waved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Regain.us. Is he a bad stepfather? Red flags to look out for. So obviously abuse. I mean, it doesn't seem like physical, emotional. We saw emotional in the first episode. Sexual. The book that this is based on suggested that the person who it was based on had suffered some sexual abuse as a child at the hands of a stepfather. So we didn't see that in
This
at least
one.
in the first episode, but obviously neglect,
Yeah.
setting a bad example. This guy didn't work.
No, he didn't.
He didn't work.
But he also didn't do anything in the house either.
No, he was cruel.
Like, he was a loafer.
Right. Yes. And he was overbearing.
Oh, God.
Yeah, really overbearing. He expected obedience. That is a big red flag. If you've got a step parent who expects to be the primary disciplinarian,
Nope.
that's not a situation that needs to be happening. And he badmouths the mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, which we totally see here and it's awful and terrible, and it can cause a lot of emotional triggers. It can be a very hostile environment in the home. Red flags.
Yeah. Red flags.
Yeah. We also see, I think, that Danny exhibited quite a few signs of abuse. So he had a lot of anxiety. He was constantly on edge. he had a desire not to go home.
Yes.
It's like when his stepfather, he knew his stepfather was going to be there. He didn't want to go home. He ran away.
Yeah.
By the end of the first episode, he is not living at home anymore.
Nope.
And then he was rebellious and defiant. I mean, he literally sold drugs at school.
Yeah.
So I would say all those things kind of qualify. And I think you can see that very much in the performance.
Oh, yeah.
So,
No, he did. He exhibited it well.
yeah. So the last thing that we're going to talk about is the wicked step-parent trope. It's usually the wicked stepmother.
I mean, a lot.
Right.
But, and there is a lot of the wicked stepfather thing.
Yeah.
You know.
At least in this first episode is
But I mean, like, you know, like I think I've seen that quite a bit too. Like
Sure.
where it's like the stepfather is the,
right.
you know.
And I can't remember where I read it. So I read it in like a little preview.
Okay.
And then I didn't save the link and then I couldn't find it again.
Oh, man.
It was really annoying. But it was that fathers aren't blamed for wicked stepmothers. It's like a given that he needed a wife and he may not take into account how that wife would treat his children. And he's not really blamed for that. Whereas if you have a wicked stepfather, the mothers were supposed to have taken into account that how this man would treat their children.
Right.
And so women are blamed for a wicked stepfather, whereas men are not blamed for a wicked stepmother.
So, yeah. Okay. So we're saying that women are blamed.
Uh-huh.
Or women are blamed.
Yes.
Women are blamed for being this bad stepmother, or women are blamed for having chosen to marry someone who was
not a good
stepdad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, yeah, that's
Yeah,
part of the course. I mean, we can't verify it. I believe it though.
Right. It's pretty old. Goes back to Rome. It's usually a toxic rivalry between an older and a younger person. And Livia Drusilla, who was the first Roman empress married to Caesar Augustus, is believed to be like where the origin of an evil stepmother kind of took place, because she had a child from a previous relationship and he had a child from a previous relationship, but it was a daughter, and the daughter was married and had 2 children. So he had 2 grandsons and a stepson, and both of the grandsons who would have taken over as emperor died.
Oh.
And Livia was blamed for their deaths. And so when her son actually ended up taking over, it was like she was the wicked stepmother.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even though he wasn't a member of
the royal family, really.
Right. Emperor Augustus's lineage. But at that time, one of the ways you criticized a man was by taking aim at the woman he was with. So they couldn't actually attack the man.
No.
So they would blame the wife for things. So she may have really just been a scapegoat. She was the original wicked stepmother, but she's not the only one. So the Brothers Grimm, went and collected the German fairy tales, and they were appalled at the number of stories that had wicked mothers in them. And so when they got the number of stories, they got these stories together, they often changed a wicked mother or a wicked mother-in-law
to a wicked stepmother
to preserve motherhood.
Oh, yeah. Good job.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
I mean, bless your hearts.
Right. And exactly.
Bless your heart.
Yeah. And I mean, because childbirth was really dangerous.
Yeah.
And I mean, it still is, but then
it was even more so.
More so. And so there were a lot of step parents.
Yeah.
So it was a very relatable thing as well. So,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. All right. So next time, I'm so excited. We have a theme for October.
I know, we're here for our themed October.
That's right.
You came up with the best.
I'm so proud of
the
it.
best thing ever.
So
I'm so excited.
We're gonna talk about robots. So it's Roboctober.
Roboctober.
First, we're gonna talk about real war robots that run on AI. We're going to talk about Unknown Killer Robots on Netflix. It talks about the ways artificial intelligence is shaping war. And because, war is crime.
Yeah.
To somebody.
To somebody,
war is crime. And then we're going to move into something less real and way more fun, I think. We're going to look at the horror movie from 2022 called Megan, and it tends to be stylized as M3GAN. So if you're looking for it, it's an AI companion who goes rogue. I can't wait for
this one. I wanted to see it so bad when it came out, and I never did.
I kind of did too.
And I was like, ooh,
my children made fun of me I was like, I don't think it looks terrible. And they're like, oh my God, I can't believe it when I say that.
Oh, really? Oh, no.
That was what my kids did. Though my 15-year-old is like, I sit in judgment of you because you've watched the Twilight movies, Mom. And
whatever.
I'm like, it's a guilty pleasure. It's just fun and ridiculousness. It's
whatever. It's amazing. It's fantastic. Yes, it is a guilty pleasure.
That's right.
I mean, vampires should sparkle.
Sure. Whatever.
Team Edward, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm like, I'll fuss at you about the dumb crap you watch on YouTube. Well, whatever. Go ahead, sit in judgment of me. Whatever. So, until next time, be safe, be kind, and wash your hands.